Today I'm covering the section in Chapter 4 called Right Teaching and Right Learning. A good teacher clarifies his own ideas and strengthens them by teaching them. Teacher and pupil are alike in the learning process. Jesus is talking about him and us. They are in the same order of learning, and unless they share their lessons, conviction will be lacking. All minds are joined. So, when we learn our lessons and we help others learn their lessons, we are helping our one self to awaken. A good teacher must believe in the ideas he teaches. That's what Jesus does. He must meet another condition. He must believe in the students to whom he offers the ideas. Again, this is what Jesus is doing. Many stand guard over their ideas because they want to protect their thought systems as they are. And learning means change. All right, that's the ego. The ego is afraid to change, and therefore it is protective of its thought system, the ego's thought system. Oh, there's a little hummingbird behind me. Change is always fearful to the separated because they cannot conceive of it as a move towards healing the separation. They always perceive it as a move toward further separation because the separation was their first experience of change. This is why our ego is afraid of change, because the first time our ego ever experienced change was when the mind split. That's when the ego was born, when the separation happened. So that was the first change our self ever experienced, because before that we were at one with God and one another in this state of oneness that this book calls heaven. That was our state of being. So the very first change we ever experienced was leaving that place, our mind splitting and us being stuck in this nightmare dream that we've been having ever since. So therefore, internally, unconsciously, we are terrified of change, because we equate change with the destruction of heaven. And we have been guiltily running away from that ever since. You believe that if you allow no change to enter into your ego, you will find peace. Because that was our original state, was just being at one with God and with one another. Therefore, it was changeless. Then the separation happened and all hell broke loose, right? So that is why we are internally terrified of change. And since the ego, in its default protection of itself, thinks that change is bad, it wants to maintain the ego thought system. It wants to keep it steady and secure because it thinks that that is safety. But all that does is keep us trapped in a world of pain, sacrifice, death, and dying. This profound confusion is possible only if you maintain that the same thought system can stand on two foundations. These are the foundations that he speaks of. Nothing can reach spirit from the ego, and nothing can reach the ego from spirit. Nothing from this world can enter this world, and nothing from this world can enter this world. Spirit can neither strengthen the ego nor reduce the conflict within it. The ego is a contradiction. Yourself and God's self are in opposition. These two worlds are in opposition with each other. They are irreconcilable. They cannot coexist. They are opposed in source, in direction, and in outcome. They are fundamentally irreconcilable because spirit cannot perceive and the ego cannot know. Spirit cannot perceive and ego cannot know. They are therefore not in communication and can never be in communication. Nevertheless, the ego can learn, even though its maker can be misguided. He cannot, however, make the totally lifeless out of the life given. Okay, so the life given is our God self, his spirit. We cannot make this fake world real. We cannot give something life that doesn't come from life. The ego thought system, our existence here in form as 3D bodies, doesn't actually have any life to it. It's not real. Real life comes from spirit. It comes from the eternal beings that we really are. Spirit need not be taught, but the ego must be, right? Our ego needs to be taught. Spirit doesn't need to be taught, but the ego does. Learning is ultimately perceived as frightening because it leads to the relinquishment, not the destruction, of the ego to the light of spirit. Ego does not want to relinquish any of its false power, so it is terrified. It is terrified to disappear into the light. This is the change the ego must fear because it does not share my charity. My lesson was like yours, right? Jesus came here to earth and he had the same lesson as us. And because I learned it, I can teach it. Okay, this is why he is teaching us and communicating to us through this book about how he learned to remember who he really was. This is what he is teaching us. I will never attack your ego, he says, but I am trying to teach you how its thought system arose. When I remind you of your true creation, your ego cannot but respond with fear. The ego doesn't know any other way to respond. Teaching and learning are your greatest strengths now because they enable you to change your mind and to help others to change theirs. Okay, that's what we are doing here as miracle workers. We are practicing forgiveness. We are practicing what Jesus is teaching us in this course. And because all minds are joined, as we wake up to the reality of who we are, we will be helping everyone else to wake up to the reality of who they are. This is how we are teaching each other. And this is what Jesus is demonstrating to us because he is teaching us. Refusing to change your mind will not prove that the separation has not occurred. The dreamer who doubts the reality of his dream while he is still dreaming is not really healing his split mind. You dream of a separated ego and believe in a world that rests upon it. We believe this world that rests upon this lie. This is very real to you. You cannot undo it by not changing your mind about it. If you are willing to renounce the role of guardian of your thought system and open it to me, I will correct it very gently and lead you back to God. So he is telling us that if we are willing to relinquish this thought system to him, to his mind, that he will help us to heal. We have to let go of this though. So when we decide to stop guarding our ego thought system and give our mind over to Jesus, that he will lead us back to God. Okay, we don't need to use the titles Jesus and God if they don't resonate with you and they're a turnoff to you. You can call them anything you want. God is our source, it's our parent, it's the source that we came from, and Jesus is just us. There's only one of us. Jesus is the higher aspect of our mind that has already awakened and knows the truth and is talking to us, right? Just like Holy Spirit's always whispering to us, telling us who and what we really are. There's only one of us. And then there's Source, and that's it. And Source and the one child of God are together as one. We exist as one. There is no separation. Every good teacher hopes to give his students so much of his own learning that they will one day no longer need him. This is what Jesus intends for us. This is the one true goal of the teacher. It is impossible to convince the ego of this because it goes against all of its own laws. Right? The ego is never going to listen to that. But remember that laws are set up to protect the continuity of the system in which the lawmaker believes. So he's telling us that the ego has built its foundation on a lie and is going to keep protecting that thought system over and over again so that it maintains its continuity, right? So that it can be stable in our existence. But we don't want that. We don't want the ego's existence. We don't want what the ego considers stability because it's not stable. It's insane and unstable and crazy. It is natural for the ego to try to protect itself once you have made it, right? That's what we did. We made an ego and now it's trying to protect itself. But it is not natural for you to want to obey its laws unless you believe them. All right, that's the problem, is we are believing the ego's lies, the ego's laws. Okay, that's why Jesus is trying to correct that with this course. The ego cannot make this choice because of the nature of its origin. You can, because of the nature of yours. Okay, so we have a choice. We are not our egos. Our ego that we made is never going to choose anything different except its ego thought system. So that's what he's telling us. It has no choice. It's just going to keep doing that. But we do have a choice. We are the chooser. We are not our egos. Right now we're confused and we forgot who we really are. Are we ego? Are we spirit? What am I? Right? We're in between two worlds. And if we don't know that we have the choice to choose one of those worlds, the one that's true, by default, we just end up in the ego world. Okay? Because we don't even know that we have a choice. So that's what Jesus is teaching us in this course, is that we have a choice. We are the chooser. And we can choose spirit. We can choose truth. We can choose love. And that is our nature that he speaks of here. Egos can clash in any situation, but spirit cannot clash at all. If you perceive a teacher as merely a larger ego, you will be afraid. Because to enlarge an ego would be to increase anxiety about separation. Okay, because that's what the ego practices. That's what it thinks. That's what it depends on. For everything to be separate and for everything to be scary. I will teach with you and live with you if you will think with me. But my goal will always be to absolve you finally from the need for a teacher. So at first he's telling us to completely depend on me. Give your mind over to me. Let me teach you what the truth is. But he's saying, once we keep doing that again and again and again, his final goal will be to absolve us from the need of a teacher. We won't need Jesus or Holy Spirit to tell us who we are anymore once we go home and we know who we are. This is the opposite of the ego-oriented teacher's goal, right? An ego-oriented teacher wants you to be dependent upon them. He is concerned with the effect of his ego on other egos and therefore interprets their interaction as a means of ego preservation. Okay, this is all about dominance. This is all about how egos want to one-up each other. They only feel important if they feel that they can get someone to depend upon them. This is how egos behave, and that is not a genuine teacher-student relationship, is what he's explaining here. I would not be able to devote myself to teaching if I believed this. And you will not be a devoted teacher as long as you believe it. So as long as we subscribe to this ego thought system of what a teacher and a student is, we will not be devoted to learning this course. The only way that we can learn this course is to stop believing the ego's thought system, which is founded on lies, is to stop believing that and to not accept that as our perception. Your worth is not established by teaching or learning. Your worth is established by God. We are already who we already are. We didn't change. We didn't lose ourselves. We just forgot who we really are. Who we are has never changed. It was established by God and it is eternal. As long as you dispute this, everything you do will be fearful, particularly in any situation that lends itself to the belief in superiority and inferiority. When we forget that we have been established by God and that we are consistent, eternal beings, and we believe that we are an ego, then we're trapped in this world of levels where things are superior and inferior, and we will be fearful. Teachers must be patient and repeat their lessons until they are learned. I am willing to do this, meaning Jesus, he's willing to do this for us, because I have no right to set your learning limits from you. Again, nothing you do or think or wish or make is necessary to establish your worth. This point is not debatable except in delusions. Okay, our worth is already here. It's established. It has never gone away. We just need to recognize it. And that is what Jesus is willing to help us do. But he's not going to force us. He's not going to force us to learn this or to recognize it. He's just here to help us if we are willing to change our mind. So he says that nothing you do or think or wish or make, right? These are all things we do within the illusory ego world, that none of those things establishes our worth. None of them. Because our worth has never left. It is spirit. It is that we are the child of God. That is our worth. It comes from God. And when we think anything different than that, we are being delusional. This point is not debatable except in delusions. Your ego is never at stake because God did not create it. Okay? So nothing that God did not create is real, meaning our ego is not real. Your spirit is never at stake because He did. He did create it, is what He's saying. Our spirit is never at risk because God created it. Any confusion on this point is delusional, and no form of devotion is possible as long as this delusion lasts. The ego tries to exploit all situations into forms of praise for itself in order to overcome its doubts, right? The ego loves to praise itself. It will remain doubtful as long as you believe in its existence. So the ego will continue to doubt as long as we keep believing it's a real thing, because that's what egos do. They doubt because they're not coming from a stable place. You who made it cannot trust it. Us who made our egos cannot trust our egos. Because in your right mind, you realize it's not real. Because there's a part of our mind that knows our ego isn't real. We know this. This is why it is not stable. The only sane solution is not to try to change reality, meaning spirit, meaning God, which is indeed a fearful attempt, but to accept it as it is, meaning accept that we come from God, accept that we really are spirit. You are part of reality, which stands unchanged beyond the reach of your ego, but within easy reach of spirit. When you are afraid, be still and know that God is real, and you are His beloved Son in whom He is well pleased. That is our truth. Do not let your ego dispute this, because the ego cannot know what is as far beyond its reach as you are. Okay, we are far beyond the ego's reach. Our reality of who we are, the spirit that comes from God, who we really are, is far out of the ego's reach. It can never really touch us. The only reason we are feeling any kind of pain or discomfort is because we are believing in the ego's thought system. We are believing in separation. God is not the author of fear. You are, says Jesus. You have chosen to create unlike Him and have therefore made fear for yourself. You are not at peace because you are not fulfilling your function. Our function is being spirit, is being one with God, extending love eternally. God gave you a very lofty function and you are not meeting it, says Jesus. Your ego has chosen to be afraid instead of meeting it. When you awaken, you will not be able to understand this because it is literally incredible. In all italics, it says, do not believe in the incredible now. Incredible meaning not credible. Any attempt to increase its believableness is merely to postpone the inevitable. The word inevitable is fearful to the ego, but joyous to the spirit. So our spirit self feels joy in knowing that it is eternal and inevitable, that we are inevitably going to know that we are just spirit. Spirit loves this, but ego hates it. God is inevitable, and you cannot avoid Him any more than He can avoid you. We are God. We're one with God. We cannot avoid that. There's no undoing that. There's no changing that. There's only ignoring that. There's only not knowing that. The ego is afraid of spirit's joy because once you have experienced it, you will withdraw all protection from the ego and become totally without investment in fear, meaning the end of the ego. So the ego doesn't want you to feel spirit's joy. Your investment is great now because fear is a witness to the separation, and your ego rejoices when you witness to it, right? Ego loves it when we witness fear. Leave it behind, says Jesus with an exclamation mark. Do not listen to it and do not preserve it, he says. Listen only to God, who is incapable of deception, as is the spirit he created, right? Our true spirit of who we are is incapable of deception. Our true spirit would never believe the ego's lies. Release yourself and release others, right? When we judge others and we believe that others are separate, we have not released them. Releasing them means forgiving them, overlooking them, knowing that they are just spirit, just like us. Do not present a false and unworthy picture of yourself to others, and do not accept such a picture of them yourself, which is just fancy words to mean forgiveness, knowing that we are all the same, we are all one, and we are all spirit. The ego has built a shabby, an unsheltering home for you because it cannot build otherwise. The ego can only build a shabby and unsheltering home because it's based on a lie. Do not try to make this impoverished house stand, right? We don't want to keep investing in the ego's lies. Its weakness is your strength. The ego's weakness is our strength. That's how we get to be who we really are, because we're going to let go of the very weak and wussy little ego beliefs that aren't even true because they're based on lies. Only God could make a home that is worthy of his creations, who have chosen to leave it empty by their own dispossession. So God made our real home. It never went anywhere. It's still there. It's the only stable home that exists, but we dispossessed it. We ignored it. We aren't knowing that it's there. Yet his home, God's home, will stand forever, he says, and is ready for you when you choose to enter it. It's always there waiting for us. We just have to choose it. Of this, you can be wholly certain. God is as incapable of creating the perishable as ego is of creating the eternal. This can only be perishable. It can be nothing other than that. And this can only be eternal. It can be nothing other than that. Of your ego, you can do nothing to save yourself or others, right? Our ego is useless in doing anything. But of your spirit, you can do everything for the salvation of both. So when we identify with our spirit, which is our true self, we heal ourselves and we heal everybody else, because all minds are joined. Humility is a lesson for the ego, not for the spirit. Spirit is beyond humility because it recognizes its radiance and gladly sheds its light everywhere. The meek shall inherit the earth because their egos are humble, and this gives them truer perception. So by identifying with our spirit self, we are being humble and we are seeing with truer perception than when we are seeing with ego's perception. The kingdom of heaven is the spirit's right, whose beauty and dignity are far beyond doubt, beyond perception, and stand forever as the mark of the love of God for his creations, who are wholly worthy of him and only of him. Nothing else is sufficiently worthy to be a gift for a creation of God himself. All beautiful words to remind us that we are truly spirit and we are very loved by God, and that this home that we have with God is eternal, and it is our only true home. I will substitute for your ego if you wish, meaning Jesus. We can let him take over our mind if we wish, but never for your spirit. Okay, Jesus isn't going to take over for our spirit. He's going to lead us to our spirit, because that is what he is. That is what we are. We are all one. A father can safely leave a child with an elder brother who has shown himself responsible. That's Jesus. He's talking about him, the Father being God. Jesus is this elder brother who has shown himself responsible, right? Because he awakened. But this involves no confusion about the child's origin, meaning there's no confusion that we are all spirit. We all came from God. The brother, meaning Jesus, can protect the child's body and his ego, but he does not confuse himself with the Father because he does this. Meaning Jesus isn't going to suddenly confuse himself with God. right? He knows who the Father is, and he knows that we all are the one child of God. He knows this, and this is what he is willing to teach us if we are willing to give our mind over to him. Him just means Christ consciousness. It's a higher aspect of our mind, a part of our mind that is perceiving correctly. This is what Jesus is. This is what Christ consciousness is. It's just another part of our mind that is whispering to us and helping us to wake up if we choose to listen. I can be entrusted with your body and your ego only because this enables you to not be concerned with them. So this is what practicing forgiveness is. We can just keep giving our mind, our consciousness over to Jesus. You can call it Holy Spirit, which is the voice for God within our dream. It doesn't matter. These are all just characters that we're using to help us to wake up. Whatever you feel attuned to, whatever resonates with you, whether it be Jesus, whether it be Christ consciousness, whether it be Holy Spirit, whether it be something you give an entirely different name, it doesn't matter what you call it. As long as you are understanding it is the higher aspect of ourselves that is coming from love, that is coming from our true home, that knows who and what it really is. This is why we are attracted to these messages. This is why we want to awaken, because we want to go home. We remember our home. We remember the love that we really are. So he's saying to trust our body and our mind to him, so that we don't have to be concerned with the ego's false thought system. He says, and let me teach you their unimportance, the unimportance of the ego thought system. Jesus wants to teach us that when we give our mind over to him, or it, whatever you want to call it. I could not understand their importance to you if I had not once been tempted to believe in them myself. So what he's saying is that he was once a man living here on earth. I mean, really, he came here many times. He reincarnated many times. Jesus was just his last lifetime. So of the times that he came to earth, he was tempted in believing the ego thought system himself. So he's saying that he couldn't understand our journey if he hadn't gone through it himself. So because he lived here, because he thought that he was a body and an ego at a certain point, and then was able to awaken from that false dream, he is now trying to show us how to do the same. Let us undertake to learn this lesson together so we can be free of them together. He wants us to be able to free ourselves of the false ego thought system. I need devoted teachers. That's us, right? The miracle workers. He wants us to be devoted teachers who share my aim of healing the mind. Okay? We're not just going to go around doing it for everyone else. We need to do it for ourselves. We are demonstrating as miracle workers. We awaken our own mind, and this is how we teach others. Spirit is far beyond the need of your protection or mind. Remember this, he says. In this world, you need not have tribulation, because I have overcome the world. That is why you should be of good cheer, he says. So he's telling us that we should be of good cheer and we should be happy because he has awakened. And since he has awakened, meaning Jesus, meaning Christ consciousness, since he has awakened, we should be of good cheer because that means we can awaken because we are all one. We are the same as him. We can take the same path. None of this is even happening. It's just a dream. And he's helping us to awaken by changing our mind. And he is willing to help us do that if we give our mind over to him.